Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the First Unitarian Society of Milwaukee's online worship service. I'm Reverend Kimberly Tomczyk Carlson, and I am honored to serve as First Unitarian Society of Milwaukee's Minister of Religious Education. We welcome people of all genders, sexualities, ages, races, ethnicities, histories, and bodies. We welcome your mind, your heart, and your spirit. We welcome all you are carrying with you today and all your heart longs to set down. I welcome you to our worship service by inviting you to repeat our mission after me. We gather to nurture the spirit, engage the mind, and inspire action. Just a reminder, next week, our worship service will be both online and in person. We are so looking forward to being together both at church and online. All details are on the church website and in the church announcements. Additionally, as you listen and are inspired by our youth today, I hope you will consider volunteering in religious education. We need you to help make a space for our children at church to learn and grow and play together. There is no preparation needed, just your time, energy, and love during first service, beginning next week. As we are in the process of rebuilding and reshaping our RE program, what we can offer our families depends on you, as it takes a village to create RE and take care of our youngest Unitarian Universalists. I hope you will join me downstairs. Today, we have a special service created by our youth who have spent the last 6 weeks exploring our Unitarian Universalist faith history and church history, asking the question, when and how have we helped widen the circle over the past 180 years? During this time, 4 of our youth chose specific topics and time periods to explore. Today, you will hear their reflections on these time periods: the Civil War and racial justice, the turn of the century, 1890 to 1910, and women's rights, the Civil Rights Movement and fair housing in Milwaukee, and the early 1970s and sexual health education. One of our youth was ill, and so I am filling in this morning by reading the land acknowledgement and the opening reading that our youth chose for today's service, and then I will let our youth speak their truths. This land was originally populated by many indigenous people who lived and thrived in an interdependent relationship with the land and the other beings here long before white colonial settlement. The indigenous people are still here and are still connected to this land. We acknowledge the Native people of Wisconsin with the intention of grounding us in the truth of our shared history and the goal of healing the harm that has been done and continues. Our opening words were written by Black Elk. Everything the power of the world does is done in a circle. The sky is round, and I have heard that the earth is round like a ball, and so are all the stars. The wind in its greatest power whirls. Birds make their nest in circles, for theirs is the same religion as ours. The sun comes forth and goes down again in a circle. The moon does the same, and both are round. Even the seasons form a great circle in their changing and always come back to where they were. The life of a human is a circle from childhood to childhood, and so it is in everything where power moves. Our teepees were round like the nest of birds, and these were always set in a circle, the nation's hoop. Then I was standing on the highest mountain of them all, and round about beneath me was the whole hoop of the world. And while I stood there, I saw more than I can tell, and understood more than I saw, for I was seeing a sacred manner all of the shapes of all things in the Spirit, and the shapes of all shapes as they must live together like one being. And I say the sacred hoop of my people was the many hoops that made one circle, wide as daylight and as starlight, and in the center grew one mighty flowering tree to shelter all children. And I saw that it was holy.
Is For Calling the Spirit Back from Wandering the Earth in Its Human Feet by Joy Harjo. Put down that bag of potato chips, that white bread, that bottle of pop. Turn off that cell phone, computer, and remote control. Open the door, then close it behind you. Take a breath offered by friendly winds. They travel the earth gathering essences of plants to clean. Give it back with gratitude. If you sing, it will give your spirit lift to fly to the stars' ears and back. Acknowledge this earth who has cared for you since you were a dream, planting itself precisely within your parents' desire. Let your moccasin feet take you to the encampment of the guardians who have known you before time, who will be there after time. They sit before the fire that has been there without time. Let the earth stable your post-colonial insecure jitters. Be respectful of the small insects, birds, and animal people who accompany you. Ask their forgiveness for the harm we humans have brought down upon them. Don't worry. The heart knows the way through, though there may be high-rises, interstates, checkpoints, armed soldiers, massacres, wars, and those who will despise you because they despise themselves. The journey might take you a few hours, a day, a year, a few years, 100, 1,000, or even more. Watch your mind. Without training, it might run away and leave your heart for the immense human feast set by the thieves of time. Do not hold regrets. When you find your way to the circle, to the fire kept burning by the keepers of your soul, you will be welcomed. You must clean yourself with cedar, sage, or other healing plant. Cut the ties you have to failure and shame. Let go the pain you are holding in your mind, your shoulders, your heart, all the way to your feet. Let go the pain of your ancestors to make way for those who are heading in our direction. Ask for forgiveness. Call upon the help of those who love you. These helpers take many forms: animal, element, bird, angel, saint, stone, or ancestor. Call your spirit back. It may be caught in corners and creases of shame, judgment, and human abuse. You must call in a way that your spirit will want to return. Speak to it as you would to a beloved child. Welcome your spirit back from its wandering. It may return in pieces and tatters. Gather them together. They will be happy to be found after being lost for so long. Your spirit will need to sleep a while after it is bathed and given clean clothes. Now you can have a party. Invite everyone you know who loves and supports you. Keep room for those who have no place else to go. Make a giveaway, and remember, keep the speeches short. Then you must do this. Help the next person find their way through the dark.
Finding Your Way, Ethelred Brown by Janine K. Grosmeyer. One morning more than 100 years ago on the island of Jamaica, a boy named Ethelred Brown went to church. Usually at this church, the people sang their creed, their list of what they believed. But that morning was Easter Sunday, a special Sunday. And so instead of singing the creed, the pastor said one line of it and the people would repeat it. This is some of what Ethelred heard. We believe the Father is God, the Son is God, and the Holy Spirit is God. And yet they are not three gods, but one God. So likewise, the Father is Lord, the Son Lord, and the Holy Spirit Lord. And yet not three Lords, but one Lord. The unity in Trinity and the Trinity in unity is to be worshipped. And Ethelred thought, what? He liked math and he knew how to add. He knew that 3 wasn't the same as 1. How could you have a unity in Trinity or a Trinity in unity? How can 3 things be one thing? How can one thing be 3? It didn't make sense to him. So right there, sitting in church, while everyone else was still saying they believed in a unity in Trinity and a Trinity in unity, Ethelred decided that he didn't believe that. He couldn't agree with what everyone else in the church was saying. He would have to find his own way. That afternoon, he went to his uncle's house. On the table was a booklet with the words, "The Lord is our God, is one God." And Ethelred thought, yes, that makes sense. He borrowed the booklet from his uncle and took it home to read. That booklet was by Reverend William Ellery Channing, who was a Unitarian minister in the United States. After reading it and some other books, Ethelred decided he was a Unitarian too. But there were no Unitarian churches in Jamaica, and so Ethelred knew he would have to find his own way. So that's what he did, for years and years. He still liked numbers, and when he was a grown-up, he became an accountant, helping other people keep a good track of their money. He got married, and he has a wife and 4 children. Then when Ethelred was 32 years old, he decided to become a Unitarian minister and start a Unitarian church in Jamaica. He didn't even know any other Unitarians, but Ethelred Brown didn't let that stop him. He found his way. He wrote a letter to any Unitarian minister in New York City, and he put it in the mail. Eventually, he got a letter back telling him he had to go to a school in the United States to become a Unitarian minister. Now, Ethelred didn't have much money, and he never left Jamaica. But he didn't let that stop him. He found a way. He asked people to give him money. He said goodbye to his wife and children, then got on a boat to go to the United States. When he finally got to the United States, they didn't let him stay because he didn't have the right papers. Ethelred didn't let that stop him either. He found a way. He went back to Jamaica, fixed his papers, and saved more money. Finally, 3 years after he had decided to go, he arrived at the school. He spent 2 years there learning to be a Unitarian minister, and he was ordained in 1912. He was the first Jamaican to go to that school. He was also the very first black person to become a Unitarian minister. 100 years ago, that made a difference. Back then, people of different colors didn't mix. The teachers at the minister school told Ethelred that he couldn't be at a church with white people. They would want a white minister. Because he was black, he had to be a minister at a church with black people. Except there weren't any Unitarian churches with black people. So the Unitarian church teachers didn't think he could be a minister at all. That didn't stop Ethelred. He found a way. He went back to his wife and children in Jamaica, and he started a Unitarian church there. It wasn't easy because the church didn't have many people or much money, and he couldn't get help from other Unitarians. But Ethelred had made his dream of being a Unitarian minister come true. After 8 years, he decided to start another church, this time in the United States. He and his family moved to New York City, and he started the Harlem Community Church in 1920. It wasn't easy there either. They still didn't have much money, and they still didn't get much help. His wife became sick, and one of his children died. Besides being a minister, Ethelred had to work long hours at an extra job he didn't like. But somehow, Ethelred found a way. For the next 35 years, Ethelred was the minister at the Harlem Community Church. Over the years, hundreds of people found their way there to pray and learn, worship, and sing, just like we do at our congregation. In fact, one of the songs we sing has a tune named after the Reverend Ethelred Brown. It's in our Singing the Living Tradition hymn book, and it's called I'm on My Way. Ethelred Brown always found a way to do what he believed in, and so should we.
There are songs in the soil and the rivers and trees, and the ears of your heart can hear them. And some come alive in the meeting of eyes when you take the time to see them. I will listen to the deeper story. I will see how life's gonna move in me. I will listen to the deeper story. I will see how life's gonna move in me. There are songs in my bones won't leave me alone, calling for creation, and tunes that ride on the whispering wind, seeking incarnation. I will listen to the deeper story. I will see how life's gonna move in me. I will listen to the deeper story. I will see how life's gonna move in me. There are songs in the clouds that shout out loud in the dark voice of the thunder, and some that flash in the cool blue fire that splits the sky asunder. I will listen to the deeper story. I will see how life's gonna move in me. I will listen to the deeper story. I will see how life's gonna move in me. There are songs that ride on the dancing tides that swirl through all the oceans, and some that dream in the bitter seed that grief will set in motion. I will listen to the deeper story. I will see how life's gonna move in me. I will listen to the deeper story. I will see how life's gonna move in me. I will listen to the deeper story. I will see how life's gonna move in me.
When I started on this journey, the extent of my UU history knowledge dated back to the 1960s at best. I was curious about a history that dated back farther and what our faith was doing to support people who were struggling during the Civil War and the periods of time surrounding it. It proved difficult to find notable information about this time, seeing as the Unitarian Universalist faith was still in the process of getting momentum and popularity in a widely Christian and Catholic society. However, when I did strike a mine of information, the small victories were celebrated. Although not much is known about Unitarians and Universalists during the Civil War compared to other moments in history, the few things that we do know are prominent. They guide us to widen our circles of knowledge and understanding to a group of people who were struggling to feel a part of something during this time. The vast majority of both Unitarians and Universalists supported abolition. Despite there being little evidence to show activity during this time in Milwaukee, there were a number of individuals around the country who did profound things for the greater good of African American people. There were, however, some people, although of the Unitarian or Universalist faith, who did not support abolitionism. This included Unitarian John C. Calhoun, who was a vice president under John Quincy Adams and Andrew Jackson. He fought pro-slavery in the 1850s, previous to the beginning of the Civil War. On the other hand, Frances Ellen Watkins Harper was an African-American female poet during the Civil War. She was raised with dual membership in a Unitarian church and an African Methodist Episcopal church in Baltimore, Maryland. Throughout her poetry, she encouraged both Unitarians and Christians to practice a form of religion that represented a stronger being of justice and humanity on behalf of those who were suffering and struggling during the Civil War era. Communities of UU pro-abolitionists were organizing rallies and meetings during this time as well, in an attempt to come together and make changes for slaves. The first known Unitarian anti-slavery convention was held in Lynn, Massachusetts in 1841. After that, annual meetings like this were held. Over time, the congregation stated that slavery went against the Unitarian faith. Even in our own city of Milwaukee, there were many people from Unitarian congregations who were active in providing aid to newly freed or escaped slaves coming from the South. Although many groups took part in the abolition movement, there were a few notable individuals in our local community who inspired with their words and actions during this time. Nahor Staples was a Unitarian minister of the First Unitarian Society of Milwaukee, who came to the church in 1856. In 1859, he preached a sermon titled The Irrepressible Conflict, foreshadowing that the Civil War was drawing near. He was supported by many people in the congregation, but also disliked by a large number. At the beginning of the Civil War, he left to be a chaplain on the front lines of the Civil War. During his time there, he was injured, forcing him to leave, so then he moved to Brooklyn, New York. While there, he served at a church where there is now a Staples Hall in his honor. This journey has led me to have a new perspective and understanding of Unitarian Universalism and how our faith has contributed to people in need. Despite the fact that the Civil War was more than 150 years ago, our church has not stopped helping people in our community. To this day, we continue to be pioneers in standing up for rights and reaching for a new perspective every day. I hope this has helped many of you earn a deeper understanding of what it means to widen the circle, as I know it has done for me. I still have many questions, and perhaps you do too. But I think this is exactly what our church is about, learning new things every day to help us be better people for both ourselves and others. I can't wait to continue learning more in the future and widen the circle of my own.
Hi, I'm Kayla Feeney. I was interested in what our church was doing at the turn of the century, especially with women's rights. So I decided to do some research. Women didn't have many rights in the late 1800s. At the start of the 1900s, they started gaining more rights. At the turn of the century, 60% of all working women were employed as domestic servants. Women also gained the right to control their earnings, own property, and take custody of their children. However, they were still not in positions of power. All of our first church leaders were men, and according to our 150-year church history by Andrew Agaki, there was a meeting in April of 1890 to discuss increasing number of trustees and specifying that some of them be ladies. Reverend Gertrude McGill was the first woman to preach to Milwaukee Unitarians doing public supply for a church from 1890 to 1891. So, what were women doing in our church? Researching made me disappointed. Relieved that they were doing something, but also angry at the restrictions and sexism. There were no easily identified leaders at our church. Women leaders at our church. Definitely not female ministers leading the church like we had today. Women's power often came through their husbands. If you had a rich husband, you were likely to have a higher role than other women. One example is Carol Metcalf, wife of William, who was a shoe manufacturer and major beneficent in the church. She encouraged the stone carvers to put her husband's image on the front of the church, and she donated the wooden carving behind the pulpit, called the Sedalia, as a memorial to the Free Marys and her family. Another way first church women found a way to help out was on Jones Island. Jones Island, south of Hope Bridge, now a sanitation plant, was at the time home to many poor immigrant families of fishermen. The Women Alliance of our church established a school at Jones Island to teach sewing to the islanders. This would allow the women on the island to create sewing jobs with their new skills. Each week during the warm month of the year, the women would go out to the public school on the island and run the sewing school. In December, they would bring a Christmas tree and a supper to the families. Additionally, First Unitarian members, particularly women, played an active role in founding the House for the Friendless, later Friendship School, Industrial School for Girls, produced and offered as a parentheses Lakeside Children's Center, and the Protestant Home for the Aged. One woman for our church, Marie Tweedy, was one of the organizers of the Visiting Nurse Association. Even though women didn't have many rights, they wanted to help their community out in any way they could. Luckily, women have more equal rights today. Women have many opportunities to be active in our church, to be leaders, to be active in our community. Our church isn't segregated now and is now a safe and welcome place. Today, I am proud to call this place my church.
Morally, I was led to nonviolence because I felt that it was the best moral way to deal with the problem. We were seeking to establish a just society, and it was my feeling then, and it is my feeling now, that violence is certainly much more socially destructive, and it creates many more social problems than it solves. So I was led to nonviolence for deep moral reasons. And I turned to it because I felt that it was the morally excellent way to deal with the problem of racial injustice in our country.
There is no freedom, the wise man said, let justice roll down when the poor cry out for shelter and bread. Let justice roll down like a mighty stream. Oh, children, don't you get weary, walk together, believe in the dream. When the way gets rough, we'll make a new way. Let justice roll down like a mighty stream. Hatred will never drive out hate. Let love roll down, roll down. Remember, our hearts can make us great. Let love roll down like a mighty stream. Oh, children, don't you get weary, walk together, believe in the dream. When the way gets rough, we'll make a new way. And let your love roll down like a mighty stream. When brutality threatens our daughters and sons, let peace roll down, roll down. May our voices rise up louder than the guns. Let peace roll down like a mighty stream. Oh, children, don't you get weary, walk together, believe in the dream. When the way gets rough, we'll make a new way. And let peace roll down like a mighty stream. Step by step, one by one, let justice roll down, roll down. They can kill the prophet, but the dream lives on. Let justice roll down like a mighty stream. Oh, children, don't you get weary, walk together, believe in the dream. When the way gets rough, we'll make a new way. Let justice roll down like a mighty stream.
I turned to it because I felt that it was the morally excellent way to deal with the problem of racial injustice in our country.
1967 was a big year for our church. With our membership expanding, our building was going through some changes. What was originally just an alleyway between our church and the building beside it became the main hallway that we know so well, among other changes. This allowed our congregation to be larger than ever. Towards the end of the year, other changes were happening on a larger scale across the whole city of Milwaukee. Inspired by civil rights events all across the country, Milwaukee citizens took action against discriminatory housing in our city. Led by Father James Groppe, Alderwoman Vel Phillips, and the NAACP Youth Council, Milwaukeeans bravely protested against segregation laws for 200 nights, from the fall of 1967 to the late spring of 1968. In bitter Midwest cold and spring humidity, they crossed the 16th Avenue Bridge each night, where they were met by counter-protesters from Milwaukee's South Side, who were no peaceful marchers. The accommodations to our church earlier that year created space for new members that were awoken to the social justice cause by the fair housing movement. John Cyrus was our minister at the time, and he was an advocate for civil rights and the fair housing movement. 3 years previous to the peak of that movement, he gave a sermon in which he expressed his support and beliefs. In that sermon, he said, "The importance of this demand is expressed in the activities of all civil rights organizations. The struggle against what is called de facto segregation in schools is basically a struggle against residential segregation. In quite another way, the importance of the demand to end residential segregation was indicated during last year, when a fair housing law was defeated in the legislature by votes from Milwaukee assemblymen. The president said forcefully that Americans have the right to work together,
travel together, and eat together. He did not say to dwell together. This glaring omission speaks loudly of its importance. His work in the church community and other communities was crucial to bring around change. Father Grappi spoke to the Milwaukee Unitarians right as the movement was gaining traction in late September of 1967. In his sermon, he detailed the task of passing a fair housing bill and how Unitarian support is crucial. Father Grappi said, "Despite all of our words, the Common Council voted against that bill 18-1. Miss Phillips presented that bill 4 times to the Common Council, and 4 times they voted it down. 18-1, 19-1, 18-1, 19-1. And so, the Youth Council began our demonstrations. We began with orderly picket lines. We have used that nonviolent technique from Dr. Martin Luther King with one exception, and that is that we believe in self-defense. Attending Father Grappi's speech at the UU Church were members of the NAACP Youth Council and the NAACP Commandos. The Commandos were a group of individuals who trained to keep the protesters out of harm's way from the violent counter-protesters. These members did not necessarily identify as Unitarian Universalists, but the church was used as a place where the marchers and supporters could grow a following from the Unitarian Universalists who were attending as well. In the archived recording of the September sermon from Father Grappi, you can see a dozen commandos standing around Father Grappi, deep in thought over his words. One of these commandos is Pam Eccles, a commando who became famous for her iconic photo where she blocks a policeman's baton with one hand and hits him across the face with another, all with a frightening but inspiring scowl across her face. The work of these people paved the way for our society today, where we no longer need trained bodyguards to protect the UU community in our marches and protests. However, the struggle towards true equality still presses on, and our church is creating equally inspiring action towards that goal. People like my neighbor, Margaret Rosga, are an example of this. Author and widow of Father Grappi, she continues to work towards social justice in our community and our city, and we can all follow her example to make a better city for everyone.
Hello, my name is Gus Pointer Mace. I was brought into the circle of First Church by the Our Whole Lives program in 7th grade. Although it was awkward at times, it provided me with many resources, tools to question the way health was taught to me in school, and was rooted in a history of advocacy for reproductive rights in our church. In addition, it gave me community and friendships I have been able to maintain through continued participation in the church. When I was in 7th grade, my parents decided to start coming to this church in order to allow me access to the OWL program. During this time, I was beginning to question my gender and sexuality, along with having intense stress about the process of applying to high school. OWL's consistency allowed me to build strong friendships forged in the fire of awkward eye contact and nervous laughter. My first genuine involvement in the church was as an interviewer for our OWL teachers across age groups. Being a representative of the youth's voice in a genuinely valuable sense allowed me to progress to leadership roles in the youth group, representative roles in other committees, and writing for the youth service then gave me the tools to speak to the congregation in other services. In addition, understanding the facts of human sexuality made me a very useful nuisance in my high school health class and beyond. The fun factoids I carried with me everywhere were rooted in a more holistic understanding of human sexuality than was offered, and I took great pride in passing such knowledge to my classmates. Although an outside understanding of health classes might assume that students are eager to get through with as little detail and embarrassment as possible, most felt unsatisfied by the level of education provided by the school. This was true at the inception of OWL, or About Your Sexuality, its precursor, where a study conducted in 1971 found that 89.9% of children ages 11 to 13 said that they should have been educated either earlier or at that point about human sexuality. Programs such as OWL are important in not only preparing us for our lives, but for allowing each generation to enter the world with the tools to advocate for their own learning. The factors at play mostly meant that my teacher just greatly disliked me, but I was able to widen the circle of learning even more than before. The history of OWL is rooted in a genuine care for the well-being of students and their health. Its precursor, About Your Sexuality, began in the 1970s, and its introduction takes issue with the lack of holistic sex education. For many students, then and now, it was fragmented, confusing, and rooted in shame. They state, quote, "When adults withhold information from youth at these ages, they are not protecting them, but are actually participating in what seems to be a conspiracy on the part of society to make integration of sexuality into the total personality of the individual as difficult as possible. They stress education on many aspects of one's life, part of the reason it was renamed as Our Whole Lives when the curriculum changed in 1999. OWL brought me into the circle of Unitarian Universalism. It and other youth-oriented programs must be continued and supported in order to create a more informed and compassionate generation of UUs. As well as the benefits to our faith, it is essential for youth to understand their contraception options and reproductive rights, as those options are threatened by a conservative court and lobbyists. If the children raised within the church have a mature and nuanced understanding of the pressures on them, socially and politically, they will contribute to a more educated and thoughtful world. Thank you. You all so much for your generosity. Pledges are the core of our church's spiritual practice of generosity. We are also grateful for additional gifts to support our ministry and thank the folks out there who are appreciating this online ministry and supporting it by texting 73256 with the message, quote, "Give to UU." That's give, the number 2, and then 2 capital U's, or giving on our website, bit.ly/UUways2give. That 2 is also the number 2. Your gifts help us continue to provide this ministry. We also share the plate with an organization each month. In February, Health Connections, Inc. is a non-profit organization bringing healthcare services to some of Milwaukee's most marginalized populations. Staff at HCI is dedicated to practicing primary care, behavioral health, and health-related social services coordination, with a special focus on vulnerable populations that traditionally experience barriers to accessing health care. These populations include youth, underinsured, HIV+, and LGBTQ. You can give to our Share the Plate partner through the same wedge page at bit.ly/UUways2give. You can see all these options to donate on your screen now, and they will live on in the YouTube comments section of this video after worship is over. Thank you so much for giving right now or when you come back later. Your support keeps us and our community partners going. Thank you.
Our closing words were written by Reverend Rod Richards. You won't be alone. We'll be side by side with one another, with people yet to come, with partners we have yet to meet, creating ever-widening, perfectly imperfect, precisely imprecise, circles and ovals and oblong things of beauty as we practice sacred flexibility, welcoming love and healing pain and demanding justice and saving lives. Go forth and create some new shapes.
We are going, heaven knows where we are going. We know within, and we will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. Whoa, yeah, yeah. Whoa, yeah, yeah. Whoa, yeah, yeah.